right, we are in the heart of the offseason here for the college basketball season, so we figured to have Adam Finkelstein of CBS Sports join us. So, Adam, thanks so much for hopping on.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So, I guess let's start with this. As people look to this UConn team heading into the next season, they have a nice mix of returners, some transfer additions, and some freshmen. Give us just your initial thoughts on this UConn roster that Dan Hurley and his staff have put together for this upcoming season.
Well, obviously, I think when you retain Reed and Caravan and Solo Ball, you're kind of taking the road less traveled because everybody's reconstructing rosters out of the portal, and you're taking guys that are used to your culture and can carry it, and are also used to your style of play. Because I think there's a level of sophistication with what UConn does schematically that would make it harder to have these 1-year rentals that a lot of other college programs do. And yet at the same time, I think they're going to be get a boost from obviously Silas Demery and Braylon Mullins and some of the other guys, the backcourt depth they've been able to acquire. So I think it's really kind of the best of both worlds from that standpoint.
Of the returners, who do you see making the biggest jump from what you saw from them last year as you think about what they might do this season?
I think that I think that we're going to see a more consistent version of Alex. I think there's a lot of people who, last year was a big adjustment for him. He was basically a tremendous role player for the first 2 years. Like, he was a starter and national champion, but, fourth, maybe fifth offensive option at times. And last year he became a focal point, and I'm not sure that is his nature. I'm not saying he's going to go out and get 20 points per game, but I think he knows what it is now. The role was so different as a junior relative to his sophomore year, but this year I think he knows what to expect. He knows it's the last go round. I mean, there's a level of clarity in what he will provide this year that I don't think was necessarily there last year. And so I think we're going to see a jump, but I think it'll be potentially more subtle. Like, I'm not sure his stat sheet is going to look glaringly different. I think it'll be better, but I think you'll see a more confident, more self-assured version of Alex who doesn't need to go out and get you 20, but has a better idea of how he can impact the game in this new role. And then I think simultaneously, the growth that Terrace showed at the end of last season, if he can continue that in the same direction. I mean, the reality is this is a guy who was really talented in high school, and then there were questions about whether or not his motor was quite good enough to play for Coach Hurley and the staff. And I think some of those questions proved to be fair earlier on, but I don't want to say they broke him, but he started to acclimate to the standard, if you will. And I think I think certainly the hope is that momentum will continue to snowball over the course of the summer, and that he's got a chance to be one of the better bigs in the game next year.
Yeah, when you walk through this incoming freshman class, it seems like the past couple of years under Dan Hurley, there's been one freshman that's really kind of stood out from the pack, whether it was Steph Castle last year, Liam McNeely. Who do you see being that guy when you look at this year's class coming in?
Yeah, it's Braylon Mullins, and that's been pretty clear. And it's interesting. It's been pretty clear since the fall, but I don't know that the reporting and some of the analysis around it really kind of caught up with it until recently. Obviously, Darius committed was the first one, and then he decommitted. Yeah. He's going to go to Maryland. But, it became clear that Braylon was going to have a much better opportunity to impact the game right away. And both from the perspective of being one of, if not the best shooter in high school basketball, and also just the level of maturity in his game. I think sometimes people have a tendency to turn on, maybe it's the McDonald's game or some of these other kind of, very visible settings, which are all-star type atmospheres. And that's not where a player like Braylon is going to shine. He's the more structured, the better for him. So this is going to be, I think, a perfect fit for him. Now, there are levels of his game. I mean, this is going to be different. There's going to be some growing pains, no doubt about it. But sure. The shooting, he's a better athlete than people give him credit for, and he's a way better defender. In fact, I think that is probably the most underrated part of his game. Now, that's another area where he's going to have to get a lot stronger
Yeah.
physically. But, he's going to be he's not going to be a liability on the defensive end of the floor. His shooting is going to be an immediate asset. His understanding of how to play the right way and not monopolize the ball is going to fit right into what they do offensively. So he's always been the guy that had a chance to make the most immediate impact. And I think that that's been true and evident since last fall. But I think now public perception has started to catch up.
When you look at outside of Braylon, who's maybe the guy in this class that might be slept on a little bit, that maybe will surprise UConn fans, and maybe from a national perspective of, hey, we didn't realize he could come in and make an impact the way he might be able to?
I think maybe Furphy, but truthfully, I think that that is it's a really hard time. That's a daunting task in this era of college basketball, where being old is a distinct advantage. And the players that have oftentimes, I mean, like a Jeremiah Fears at Oklahoma last year, I don't know that that'll happen this year anywhere in college basketball. Somebody who was good, nationally ranked, like everybody knew he was really good, but then he was a star. I don't know that. I mean, who knows? I mean, it was a surprise last year. If it happened again, it would be a surprise this year. But I think, we've seen enough of, I'll tell you this, for Ryba in particular, it's going to be about how quickly, like I said about Reed, how quickly can he acclimate to UConn's culture, their standard. But that gap is even bigger for Ryba. I mean, he's obviously a couple of years older, but the level of physicality of, that's really like the biggest thing from an athletic standpoint, from a durability standpoint, and especially from a physical standpoint. If he can really buy into the way UConn does things, he's got a chance to really ascend, but I don't expect that to happen overnight. It certainly could, but I think that's going to be a process. But Furphy's someone that's a little bit of a wild card because nobody's seen him play, and in the States, like I still have never. I've only seen him on tape. And at least in the last year. But from a basketball IQ perspective, from everything that the film shows and everything that I have been told about from the people around him, his processing ability is so high. When you talk about that sophisticated offensive system, he's got a chance to really be effective in that. But it's going to come down to him, like conditioning and defense. Like that's the area, Braylon's going to be able to hold his own defensively. Whether or not Furphy can do that, time will tell.
Yeah. The UConn non-conference schedule has been coming out in bits and pieces here, but from what we saw as of yesterday when they announced a game against Kansas, a home and home series, it seems like this schedule one of the better ones in college basketball. What are some of these matchups that you're looking forward to as you think into next year, whether it's checking out, going up against BYU or Kansas, obviously the rematch against Florida? Which matchups kind of stick out the most to you?
Those were the two, because those are the top two picks in the draft next year, I think.
Yeah.
At least like a year out, that's what AJ and Darren Peterson are right now going to be projected as 1 and 2, 2 and 1, whatever you may think. So just and what comes with that is national exposure, TV, whatever. I don't know what networks they're on yet. Let's go CBS, but I don't know. But there's going to be visibility around all of those matchups, and it's going to be, regardless of what network the game may air on, that's going to be across all of college basketball media platforms. There's going to be an NBA scouting presence at those things. So I think those are great for the obvious reasons of building up your non-conference schedule, helps with all those metrics come March. But just from a branding schedule and a visibility schedule in the first half of the season, it's going to be really helpful. One of the things that you learn on the media side is about kind of the attention span of the masses and where the casual sports fan tends to steer their attention. And college basketball gets many more eyeballs after football season is over, both college and the NFL. Now, I think it's crazy. I watch basketball year round. But it's just a reality of the sport, is that the interest level continues to rise throughout the course of the season. And there are significant gaps after the college football season ends, bumps after the college basketball season ends, and then after the NFL season ends. But these type of preseason matchups are going to be national sporting headlines at a time when college basketball is fighting for attention. And let's face it, like Coach Hurley is, I know he's made comments about, why are people looking at me, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, but because he's arguably the biggest coaching name in the sport now. So these matchups with him at the helm, with the top draft picks, are going to be good for the sport as well, in a time of year when the sport is fighting for attention.
Yeah. Speaking of paraphrasing the quote, I think it was with you when Eric Riba mentioned he's happy to be a Husky line.
Yeah.
Did that catch you off guard when that happened?
So true story. I had like a glitch in the internet when that happened, so I didn't hear it clearly. And when it was, and that's not, I mean, I'm sitting in the same seat I was then right now.
Yeah.
And so I see him react. So I'm kind of like playing off his reaction, like, yeah, it's funny. I don't really know what you said. And then afterwards I said to my producer, I was like, did he say what I think he said? And he's like, oh yeah, he said that. And then I was like, I was worried about like a CBS perspective, like what were the implications from viewership, because I wanted to make sure that didn't stop it from getting aired on different CBS platforms. So again, like in the weeds of the media, those are just like the practical realities of what I was concerned about. But yeah, that's first of all, I was like, did he really just say that, or did they bleep it out, or what? And then it's like, okay, can we not? Does this limit how far we can send this to? Is CBS Sports HQ going to pick this up? Is the CBS Sports app going to pick this up? Because a prospect of his stature committing to the two-time defending national champion, that kind of content has a chance to like really multiply the views we can get in the CBS platforms. And I just went to making sure that didn't stop us from doing it.
I've got to ask, just going back to the matchups too a little bit. I know we've always got the Champions Classic early on in the season, but this year you've actually got a Champions Classic game. It's not Champions Classic, but Jimmy B with UConn and Florida in both the most recent national champions. What do you think of that matchup as you think about it here?
I think that's awesome. I mean, like, just couldn't be, again, like the storylines, so the last two national champions, last three, however you want to say it, last three national championships, I think that two coaching personalities that captivate a lot of attention, for different reasons, whatever the case may be. But again, that's going to be good for the sport. Kudos to both of those guys. And I will also say, like, this year during the course of the season, our 24/7 sports basketball show that was on the CBS Sports Network, we're fortunate enough to have both of those coaches on the show. And from a sheer basketball standpoint, like, those are two of the most intelligent, forward-thinking coaches you're going to find. And, when you have people like that who are often, so like 2 years ago, I made the comment about Dan. I said, and the staff, I was like, they're playing chess when everybody else is playing checkers. You watch the way they were executing on that end of the floor. But Todd has a level of, not necessarily like in different areas, that he, like the way they incorporate analytics, the way they utilize analytics to make their evaluations out of the portal, stuff that is not like, they're a little reluctant to be totally transparent with, because other people haven't caught up. So I just think it's awesome for the sport. I think it's going to get a ton of eyeballs. Same concept at a time when the sport needs eyeballs. It's going to obviously have really important ramifications from a postseason perspective, for getting these teams prepared for their conference play. But I think it's a win all around.
Yeah. For sure. I know it's another one of the exciting ones on the non-conference schedule there. As you just get ready to wrap here, just quickly on the Big East as a whole, in terms of the offseason you think the league had and where it kind of stands going into 25-26 here.
I think the Big East is at the Big East is at a little bit of a crossroads in this era of NIL, and it's this still evolving thing. And it sounds like most recently things are going well in that world for the Big East. But if you followed this process, I think it's going to be ongoing, and I wouldn't expect the SEC and Big Ten, Big 12 to ever accept a world where they are getting outspent on basketball by Big East schools. In the short term, though, like, listen, I grew up in Connecticut. Like, I tell people, I grew up at a time when UConn was first starting to become a national name, and by extension, and when you grew up in Connecticut in those times, like, you didn't dream about, like, when I grew up, I didn't go outside and shoot on the basket thinking I was at Madison Square Garden or the Boston Garden. Like, you grew up dreaming about, like, as a kid, thinking you were at Gamble, and of playing in the Big East. And those, it was the best basketball ever. And I think that it's still a really good conference, and but we need more. It needs a little more parity. I think this is a year where they've got to do better in the non-conference schedule, because once conference play comes along, teams are going to beat themselves up.
Definitely.
So I think for the collective health of the Big East is hopefully having a little bit better non-conference run through the totality of the league, right? Not just relying on UConn, Creighton, and Marquette and St. John's to get it done, but, like, what are the rest of the schools going to look like, and what are they going to do in the non-conference? So you set yourself up to have 5, 6, 7 teams in the tournament instead of 3 or 4. That to me is I think I don't really like that about college basketball, to be honest, where, like, your season is, I don't want to say it's decided, but so much is predicated on what happens in the first 6 weeks of the season. It's almost unfair in some ways, but it's the reality of the way the sport works. And the Big East is in a position where they need to deliver early on.
Yeah, for sure. But Adam, I really appreciate you taking some time here in the off season to give some insight into this team and what's ahead. So thanks so much for hopping on with us on Star Central.
Yeah, my pleasure.